Well, welcome back, Shark Fins. I am Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson, and I am joined with Chris Anonymous, Lance the Obscure Movie Guy, and we are talking about the good, the bad, and the schlock of the new Netflix original, Under Paris. But first, man, it has been a long time. It has been 7 whole months since we've done a schlock show. How are you guys doing? It's good to see you.
Good. It's been a minute, but I'm glad we came back for Shark Month. So it feels good.
Can you believe it? Like seven full months. I feel like I don't even remember how to do this, but Lance contacted us and he's like, we got to do Shark Month. We got to do something for Shark Month. Check out this movie, Under Paris, that is apparently the biggest shark movie out right now.
Well, it's probably the only shark movie out right now.
That's probably true. I don't know. I feel like maybe there's like at least 100 made a year. I'm sure there's some sort of statistic for that. But yeah, I'm glad to be back. I love Shark Month. I think it's really fun. I'm glad that we can do this. I have an important question for everybody. This is a French film.
Correct.
If you didn't know. So when you watched it, did you watch it in French or did you watch it with the English dub? Now be honest, it's okay.
So me personally, I did watch the English version. I wanted to watch the French. Usually when I watch foreign films, I try to watch them in their actual language and read the subtitles, but my wife was watching and she refuses to do that unless I read the subtitles to her. I wasn't doing that for an hour and a half. So
read the entire movie to her?
Yeah, she can't keep up, and I was like, you know what, if she's willing to sit through this for me, then I'll just watch the English version. But most of my foreign films that I watch, I actually do watch in their native language, whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's fair. Chris,
I do feel like some things get lost in the translation with the the dubbing. So that's why I try to watch it in the original.
I mean, I watched it in the French, but I think things get lost in the translation, even with what they translate
with the subtitles.
With the subtitles, like some of it, you're like, that's not how you say that in English. I'm sure a better translator could have made that make more sense. So I think no matter how you watch it, things are lost in translation.
Yeah. Well, I watched it not only in the English, I also watched it with the English subtitles at the same time because I am deaf and I need all the help that I can get. And to be fair, I think they did pretty good at like keeping the dub matched with the subtitles. Sometimes you'll watch a dub and the subtitles don't match up at all, and it's maddening but also very entertaining.
So most of the time that you had 2 sentences for every line of dialogue.
No, I didn't watch it in the French at all.
Got it. Okay.
No French subtitles.
English. All right.
I don't speak French.
You
ate the whole cheese wheel?
Right.
So
not even mad. That's impressive.
So this movie, I mean, we're into foreign film territory. I think this is this the second official foreign film we've done on this show? The only other one I can think of is Battle Royale.
Oh, that is a good
Battle
flick.
Royale.
That's a really good flick.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, Warriors of Virtue was technically an American release, but it was pretty much all foreign.
Okay,
maybe, but there was some Italian. Didn't we do like an Italian zombie flick?
We did Shark in Venice last year.
We should, yeah. Well, and that was like a Bulgarian movie. So
yeah, but it was in Italy.
What about Killer Mermaids?
That's I remember that movie was kind of like, it was sort of on the cusp. Yeah, where it's like it's as foreign of a film as you can get without it being like just not in English.
Right.
But I think maybe some people were like actually speaking English, and then others were speaking a different language, and they dubbed in the English, and so it was kind of a weird.
It's like one of those weird Hong Kong movies where, like,
yeah,
you could tell the Chinese actors are speaking Chinese, and the American ones are just speaking English back to them.
Yeah, and it's because of those movies. I honestly don't mind watching the dub, because to me that, like, watching the lips not line up with what they're saying, I don't know. It has some weird nostalgic feel to it, right? Watching it like in late 19 or something.
There's a schlocky charm to it, and that's I mean, that's what we're doing, right?
Well, I mean, for me, it goes back to like black belt theater, like on Saturday afternoons when I was a kid, and the local station would play the old kung fu movies, and I mean, bad lip sync all the way around, and it makes me feel like a kid again. It's amazing.
Yeah, and for me, it was spaghetti westerns.
Right? There you go.
They're speaking Italian,
right?
But
yep.
And you just
glad that other languages. I'm glad that other languages exist so that they can get dubbed into English and not have the lips move, so we can have our nostalgic moments.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, it being a foreign film, I was looking up the money situation, how much it costs, and it's all in euros. So, and I saw some conflicting things. It's somewhere between 19 to 25 million euros, which I'm like, what is that, like $20, or is it 200 billion bucks? I don't really know. But it looks like it's around 20.9 million US dollars. So it's a low budget, big budget movie, right? That's about the range for it.
Yeah.
That's that sweet Netflix money. And of course, there's really no box office cash for this, because it's a streaming release. So who knows how much money it's made Netflix. Maybe someday we'll start seeing numbers like that, where they say, like, we've gained X amount of subscriptions and we got X amount of views on this, so it generated this much revenue or something.
I don't think they're garnering any new subscribers just because there's a shark in Paris.
You don't think people just man, I gotta,
I don't think this was a must-see movie.
Yeah. Well, I got Netflix for this because I quit Netflix a long time ago, but I trust you, Lance.
I wish I could. And again, the wife.
I wish I could quit you.
I wouldn't have Netflix. I wouldn't have Disney Plus. I'm perfectly fine with like Freevee and Tubi. Like, they've got everything I need.
Exactly. Well, and I got it, and I'm like, man, let's see. Now that we got Netflix, I gotta watch the new Beverly Hills Cop movie. Gotta pick back up on Supernatural. Like, just got to do all sorts of stuff now.
Yeah,
but
catching up.
The Axel F movie actually wasn't that bad, but that's probably a different discussion for a different day.
Well, so speaking of which,
it doesn't have to be.
Lance, you have your own YouTube channel. You do a podcast periodically. We love having you come on the show. What kind of things do you have going on in your world?
Well, I mean, at the moment, kind of making a shift in the channel to more independent type films. I've been doing a lot of reviews. I've had a lot of writers and producers and management companies, reach out and want me to, do a review on some of their independent stuff. Currently working on a vampire one called Beneath Us All. So I had a Williamson management company reach out to want me to do a review on that. So I'll have that coming up. I am an assistant producer for Acrostar on their upcoming Return of the Corn Zombies for 2025. So I'll be doing a lot of promotion on the channel and the Facebook page for that. So, and you should definitely check out Attack of the Corn Zombies on the Acrostar Films YouTube channel. It's actually a decent independent film. You can go right to it on YouTube. Yeah. And watch it for free. Yeah, Attack of the Corn Zombies is the first one. A lot of good reviews on that. It's on their channel. It's a little over an hour long, and nothing. They're not setting the world on fire, but it's a period piece. It takes place in the '60s, and anytime Acrostar does something like that, they always try to film it in the same type of film grain or whatever caliber it is, I guess, at the time.
Yeah.
So it's filmed in actual like 60s type 35 millimeter film or whatever it is.
Yeah,
so
same aspect ratio.
Exactly. They did the same thing when they did They Came From Somewhere and They Came Back From Somewhere, which were like 50s B movie sci-fi flicks, and they were filmed in black and white and the correct period aspect ratio and film type. So when they do period pieces like that, they really go all out to try and make it look like it's from that time period. So
yeah,
that's what I've got going on. I haven't done a podcast in a while. I don't know if I want to continue that or not. Nothing's really, I never really gained a whole lot of traction with that, but
yeah,
we'll see. Work in progress.
You got to push the boulder up the hill, man.
Right.
Until you love it. So
until it
rolls back down and destroys you.
Right.
So people might notice that this is a little bit different than what we've normally done. We're spending kind of a lot more chit-chatty time before we're really getting into the meat of the show. And that's because, we've been making some big changes here on the Compelled by Schlock channel. If you've been keeping up with the channel, you may have noticed that we've had some shorter, more edited content. And that's because we're just trying to build our audience, trying to get more people, give a lower barrier to entries so that we can trick them and coax them into coming and watching us in a longer form. And so this is a little more podcast oriented this time. So we don't have a whole lot of pictures or anything. We're going to take some time instead of trying to fit into that smaller 30 to 45 minute like YouTube bubble. So everybody just grab a beer, kick back and relax and come hang out with us, jump in the chat, all that good stuff. So Lance, just to kind of continue with what you're doing a little bit, I got to ask, so you're getting all of these kind of contacts from independent filmmakers, which is awesome. And I'm really glad to see you going in that direction more. But I got to ask, is it because YouTube gave you such a hard time with some of your recent videos?
It's a little from column A and a little from column B.
All right.
I've always kind of had a soft spot for the independent film and low budget stuff. And I've been doing stuff with AcroStar for a couple of years now. And then I had Sean C. Phillips reach out to me at one point, wanted me to do a review wanted me to do a trailer review for his Desert Fiends, which should be being released. I think it's out for distribution right now, so hopefully it'll be out for video on demand here in the next couple months. But after talking with him, we grew up in the same area, so we were relatively close to each other in age and location, and we kind of reminisced about some stuff. And now he's located in Vegas, where he does a lot of his filming. But, talking with him and dealing with him kind of opened the door to a couple more people that, I probably wouldn't have run into otherwise. And they started reaching out and, well, hey, would you do a trailer review on my, movie? Or would you, do a full review on my movie? And it's like, you know what, why not? And most of the stuff I watch, it's always been obscure to begin with. So I'm not deviating from the obscure factor. I'm just kind of focusing more on the independent stuff because I don't have to deal with the copyright stuff as much. And, I did have an ordeal with Netflix where, I can't get a video posted because of a copyright, no matter how many times I tried to edit down the video or change the video or whatever the case was. It still wasn't good enough, which sucks because I'm not monetized, I'm not making anything off of, what I'm
You're
doing.
Advertising for free.
If anything, I'm telling people to go watch it on Netflix, like we're doing here, but it's a hard market to crack. And I think we've talked about this quite a few times. People do what we do on various levels, obviously with various degrees of success. But I even think some of the, even the bigger guys like Joe Blow or the Critical Drinker, guys like that still run into demonetization sometimes with their videos. And I don't know how to get around it without getting like the NFL with like expressed written consent. I can use your, your footage. So.
Well, so now we're going to do another Netflix movie.
Right.
And all that being said, we're going to jump into a Netflix original. So let me look at my notes here. Oh, yes. we talked about whether we watched it in English or French, but there are some interesting names for this movie. So honestly, when Lance, when you first told me to check this movie out, I watched the trailer and I was like, oh, this looks like someone probably watched our podcast for Shark in Venice and said, hey, we could make this movie better. And that they decided, and that's really what I was looking forward to. It did not turn out to be that way. But it did definitely pique my interest. So while I wish it would have been called Shark in Paris and would have followed more of that line, I do think some of the names of this movie are interesting because, of course, for us, it's called Under Paris, not Shark in Paris. But in other places, it is titled Sous la Seine. Right? Does anybody know what that means? I believe it means under the river. And do you know where it's called? Sous la Seine? Any takers?
The river it's under?
No. The movie, why it's called Sous la Seine.
Because the sharks are in the
Shark in the river?
The sharks are in the Seine River.
Sorry, this bit's going to hell. It's called Sous la Seine in Canada because they speak French there. It's also the French name.
Okay.
Yeah. Seine is the river that this takes place on. Seine, I think, is how you.
I think it's pronounced the Seine River.
Seine.
Like insane.
Seine.
Yeah, Seine.
Yeah, we can say that. I can shift
Seine,
the Seine
Seine.
River. But is it also not a river? Is it like more of a canal? I don't know. I think there's some nitpicky things that you could really go through in this movie. Yeah, they did make that abundantly clear.
Well, we'll get into that.
But the coolest name for this movie that I saw in a few countries, the only one I can remember right now is Norway, but it's in a few countries. The coolest name of this movie is Sub Paris. I don't know.
Paris.
Sub-Zero.
See, and that makes them. I want a submarine in the Seine fighting a shark.
Now
that's the movie.
There's the movie.
Paris.
Somebody give that man a contract.
So that's all I got for an intro. If you're watching this, if you're listening to it, and you like hanging out with us, make sure you follow us or subscribe or rate or like or do all of that stuff, and just become a part of the Schlock party here. The way we do this show is we talk about the good, what we like, we talk about the bad, what we didn't like, and then we talk about the schlock, and that is just a free for all of what we thought of the movie in general. What big ideas do we think were there? How do we think it could have been better? What stuck out to us? All of that stuff. But before we get into that, we like to talk about who starred in this movie, who made this movie, in a little segment we called Web of Schlock. Chris, what do you have for us in the Web of Schlock?
Well, we can start with the lead actress, Bérénice Bejo. You might have seen her in A Knight's Tale. She was Christina in A Knight's Tale.
Okay.
And she was also a character named Peppy Miller in The Artist, which won Best Picture several years ago. And she was nominated for supporting. She was nominated either for supporting actress or actress. I can't remember which one. But she was nominated for an Oscar for her role in The Artist.
Okay.
Then
So
the
some top
lead,
talent.
top tier talent. Yeah. Nassim Lies, I believe is how you say his name. He was the main cop in the film. He's been in a lot of movies, a lot of French movies, but there was one called Mayhem that just came out right before this. And the reason I bring that up is because it was also directed by the director of this film, which is Xavier Gens or Xavier Gens. Yep, Gens, Gens. He directed Hitman back in like 2007 with Timothy Olyphant.
Oh, okay.
And tons of French movies, some TV series. He was one of the 23 directors on the ABCs of Death.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Which segment did he do? Do you know?
I'm not sure. No. So the interesting thing, though, about him and Nassim And I was looking through a lot of the other actors, a lot of the smaller roles. It seems like it's that trend that we've seen a lot, that you find your people in one movie, and then you keep those people and you bring them into your next film and into your next film. So from what I could kind of gather, this felt like he had a lot of the same players that he'd used before, both on screen and behind the screen, it's always cool to see that world in horror and schlock and this isn't a low budget film, but it still has that kind of indie foreign vibe.
Yeah. Well, and why not use the people you like to work with, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's about it.
Sweet. Well, let's get on with the show. We're 20 minutes in. We'd be like basically over by old standards.
I'll be getting a couple text messages by now. Wrap it up.
Yeah, wrap it up. Come on. But no, let's get into the meat of the show, starting with the good. Lance, you're our guest. You picked the movie, so I want you to take the lead on this. What did you think was good about Shark Under Paris? Or wait, under Paris.
Under Paris.
Sub-Paris. Whatever you call it, whatever you want.
Yeah, wherever.
I mean, if for all that it has good, I mean, production value, I think, was pretty good. Most of the time, the CGI for the shark was pretty good. Mm-hmm. And they did have a couple of practical special effects here and there that were actually halfway decent. The production value was really good. I think the best thing that stood out to me, and I even texted Darby while I was watching it, was the opening scene of this movie was, to me, phenomenal. It hit all of the right marks as far as an opening scene goes. You know, it introduces the characters, it introduces the protagonist and the antagonist, and it introduces them to each other. And then, of course, you have, you know, this mystery of this shark that's, you know, why is it so big? Why does it look different? And it kind of leads you down this path of like wanting to, you know, watch the movie and figure out what's going on. It left you wanting more. That was by far one of the best opening scenes I've seen in a shark movie. Because, you know, most of the time with these shark movies, you know, especially these substandard ones that we all watch, like the opening scene's always somebody getting eaten, but it's usually like inconsequential to the storyline. It's just a shark eating a random character. Mm-hmm. This one actually set up like, and semi-moved the plot forward, like, hey, this lady's going to have to deal with this shark. This lady's going to have to deal with this grief. Yeah. You know, this
potentially a vendetta.
Right, exactly. So it kind of left you wondering, you know, where is this going to go? And that's you kind of get hooked right at the beginning, and then you watch the movie and you see what, you know, follows. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember when you were watching it, you texted me. And you're like, man, I can't remember exactly what you said, but you're like, man, I think you're going to love this movie. Honestly, as I was watching the movie, I was like, why would Lance think I would like this? And my big good for it is eventually it gets to the part where it eats all the environmentalists. And I was like, oh, I see why Lance could see.
Also a huge plus.
So that's my number one in the movie. But yeah, I think you're right. The movie, it's very competently produced. The special effects are good. It's well acted. I mean, this movie was competently put together. Maybe not so sure about the overall story, but as far as like the visual medium of film, I think it did.
That is a good way to put it.
Let's see. I as far as the beginning goes, I kind of skipped past that because I do have things to nitpick in the beginning. But I did really like once we got to Paris, that it started with the people doing the magnet fishing for the unexploded artillery, and how they set that up. Because I'm like, man, if they don't bring this back up, like I'm gonna be so mad.
You're gonna have yourself a good old fashioned Chekhov's gun, is what you're gonna have.
Yeah, like this is it. Now, spoiler, I am disappointed in how that all turned out, but I am glad that they brought that in and that it came full circle. I'm very stoked about that. And also, man, if you're gonna do a movie about a shark going around under Paris, right? You got to use the catacombs. You got to use the skull laden under Paris catacombs and get that cool imagery of the shark moving around there and them being in that creepy environment. I mean, it's a big duh. You need this, and they put it in, and so I definitely have to give them props for doing that.
Well, you guys took everything I had for good. What I wrote down, I have the acting. I have that it looks good. I thought the production looked really good. I have the catacomb scene. I thought for the most part the effects were really good. The only thing I have to add that I liked, and I don't know if this is good, but it's good in delivering on what I wanted the actual whole movie to be, and that's Act 3. Once Act 3 happened, I'm like, this is so ridiculous and silly. I wish the whole movie was this.
Yeah.
So that's really all I have to add is Act 3 I thought was a lot of fun. Good. Yeah. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but
yeah.
But that was definitely, I'm like, man, why did it take so long to fire in these cylinders? But
yeah, I have more to say about the end in Schlock because I don't know if I thought it was good, don't know if I thought it was bad, but I got some ideas on it. So something I'll add, which I think is interesting, the fact that the Paris Olympics are coming up, I think like in 3 days. I think by the time this podcast gets out on the podcast platforms, the Olympics will have started. And so of course they're going to be doing all their like boat races and stuff down the Seine. And I think that this is cool to like put into the cultural conversation right before that happens, that there might be sharks in here.
So the irony to that is, and this is one of the things that I was going to add, but one of the tidbits and the irony to that is that in the movie, they're having the conversation of don't do the triathlon because there's a shark in the water. And the reality of that conversation is they're having the same type of conversation with the French government because there's too much shit in the water. So
but in real life,
the Seine River is like New York's Hudson River.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not necessarily safe to do the triathlon. It's not necessarily safe to do any of these water sports that you want to do on the Seine River. So they've spent an exuberant amount of money cleaning up the Seine River, which they kind of touched on in the movie. Like, hey, I've put out all this money to put on this event. I'm not going to stop it because of a shark. And basically Paris is, it's the same thing. Well, we're not going to stop it just because of some shitty water. And it's like,
but so in real life,
people are going to get sick. So yeah, in real life, the Seine River is insanely dirty.
They didn't bother to clean it for the Olympics.
They have tried to clean it, but I don't think it was a success.
Yeah, I think they've sectioned off a part that they're saying is clean.
Okay.
Right? But I mean, we'll have to interview some of the Olympians afterwards to see if they have a certain taste in their mouth.
Ask if they'd like to come on to the show and tell us their
see if any of them have pink eye or dysentery.
Do you need a mint, sir?
Yeah. We'll have to find the bronze medalists or something. What's lower than bronze? What do you got?
It's like going to be rust coming out of the friggin' river.
Bronze is about the right color.
So, well, as far as trash and things like that go, I do have a lot to say about that. But let's move on. Let's get into the bad of the movie. And we'll let Lance take lead on that again. What did you think was bad about the movie? I think you got something bubbling here.
I mean, my biggest problem with this movie, and Chris kind of touched on it when he talked about Act 3. This movie it suffered from bad directing. The movie did not know what it wanted to be. Did it want to be a shark movie? Did it want to be a horror movie? It's got all of these nods and tropes from all of these other genres thrown into this movie, and it just kind of deteriorated after the opening scene for me. As far as the environmental aspect, I mean, I kind of get that. It's plausible, but we're not going to save the shark, save the world. So that was a little over the top as far as the environmentalists go.
Yeah.
I mean, the catacombs, I mean, that's probably more of a schlock conversation, so I'll hang on to that for now. But it did look cool, but really a shark that big swimming around in the sewers of Paris, come on, that's a hard bite to chew, pun intended.
Yeah, that definitely. All I wrote down was like deep water. Like how deep is this water?
Exactly.
If they would have had like a Winnie the Pooh moment where the shark kind of gets stuck and then has to wiggle through, I would have believed it a little more that he's there or she's there,
or like busted through.
I don't know.
Yeah, bust through a wall.
Right.
It just. But it seemed to just like swim freely, and then again, the one part of the catacomb scene, now there's like hundreds of sharks, and it's like there's not enough room for all of this. It's not open water.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they really kind of ignored spatial features throughout this movie. Like, so I know that you love the opening scene, but when she gets dragged under.
Well, yeah, that was
so far. I was like, their head's gonna explode.
Yeah, that I did have some reservations about that.
She got a bloody nose. What more do you want? She got a bloody nose. Well, come on.
I mean, she would have suffered from the pressure, or even if she escaped that and made her way up, she would have suffered from the bends. Yeah. But I guess that aspect leading up to that, it's almost like Maverick for me. Like the movie's great up until Tom Cruise gets shot down. He should have died. Right there, and the movie should have ended, and that would have been fine. So, like, the same thing with the opening scene. It was great up until that part, and then you're like, okay, I kind of see where we're going with this.
You don't need all the Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world coming in like, well, actually, the velocity.
Right. Like it's a bloody movie. Okay, just leave it be.
It's movie logic. Well, so into the bad for me, like you kind of brought it up with the trash, the shark having like the asexual reproduction, which I looked it up. It's a thing. So I don't know. Let me back up. The evolution of the shark, right? That is the impetus of why the shark is the way that it is. It has evolved. She has evolved into a non-binary shark of some kind. I feel like
band name.
What?
Band name?
I feel like I didn't get enough answers as to what exactly was going on. Like so the shark evolves, but why? Is like they open up the opening scene. They're in the what's it called? The Great Trash Island or whatever.
I think it's the Great Garbage Patch.
Yeah.
I mean, the Great Trash Heap has spoken. Yeah.
So, yeah. So so I think the heavy implication, right, is that we're polluting the ocean and that is causing the sharks to evolve. But what I really needed was, why this shark? Why is this shark that they just so happen to be following and studying that hadn't evolved prior? Lilith. Yeah. Why this shark? Why were they following it exactly? Like, I'll get into this later, or I was wanting to get into this into Schlock, but right, if it was kind of a Deep Blue Sea situation where they had been messing with this shark and it's just why did this happen? Why did the shark go through all of these changes? And I don't think it gives us a good enough explanation. The only explanation we really get, as far as I can remember, and I thought this was hilarious, at the very beginning of the movie, they have the quote about evolution and about how it's not necessarily like the strongest, but it's just the most adaptable. And I'm messing up the quote, but that's because the quote isn't by Charles Darwin. It's based on Charles Darwin. Did you notice that? I'm like, they couldn't have just gotten like a straight up quote. I don't know what it says in the French version, but I was like, man, they really phoned this in. Like they should have just made something up. And they did, but they could have attributed.
I mean, they basically paraphrased it just like you did.
Yeah, I mean, they could have said ancient Klingon proverb.
Yeah, evolution's about the something with the thing that adapts better. I don't know, whatever.
With the ladies and the touching.
Yeah, it's some
Yeah.
Charles Darwin stuff. On with the movie.
Right. Which is fine.
So, and the thing is, so all right, we start with the trash heap, and then I couldn't help but notice that throughout the movie, even though our main protagonist, her deal is that she's environmentally concerned about the oceans, right? That's, I believe, what she's lecturing on when we see her again in Paris. But when she goes home, she is producing a very large amount of trash. Like, did that stick out to anyone? That like the sound of the wrappers and stuff when they're eating?
But that's on
like,
land.
It says out in the ocean. It's fine. Just set it on fire.
Ocean. Yeah.
So I'm like, is there a message here that like, even if you care, like you still pollute? I don't know.
The message is too little, too late. Shark's out of the bag, and she can reproduce with herself. And there's thousands of sharks, and Paris is doomed.
So I guess where I'm trying to go with my bad is just that like these two things, the evolution of the shark, why it is the way that it is, and the environmental message, like I just don't feel like they connected well enough. And that led for, I don't know if it led to a muddy movie, but it led to
muddy waters,
maybe not compelling story in some way, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. For my bad, I agree with both of you. I have some more just basic bads. I thought it was a little too long, and I think that's because the first two acts were so boring. I thought Act 1 was pretty bad. I as a scene in and unto itself, before she gets dragged down, I agree with Lance. It is a compelling opening. My problem is, besides setting up with the character, it doesn't really have a lot to do with the rest of the movie. That 3 years later, if she was so into the shark and it just killed your crew and your husband and everything, I get you're traumatized, but also you know that this shark just grew. You know something is seriously wrong, right?
Yeah, we get that at the beginning.
Yep.
Right. And then you go off to teach and not do anything about it, not tell anyone about it. Like some other young woman has to come up to you and says, I turned Lilith's tracker back on. Like she was just walking away from the problem. And like, so like character wise, that made no sense to me. I'm like, I don't think she would do that. And then the problem on top of that is compounded with coincidence. So then it ends up in Paris, and she also ends up in Paris.
Of course. I mean,
yeah,
convenient.
Very convenient.
It's smart enough to track her. I mean, that's kind of what I got, was maybe that it was.
But then they're saying that she needed like this kind of almost brackish water that's kind of salt water, kind of fresh water, where she can go, because like she's based off of mako sharks, and they have to have their young or do something in fresh water, was their excuse in the movie. So I think the structure is really weak, and again, that's a problem when it's supposed to be this fun kind of summer blockbuster shark movie, right? It's whether you like Act 3 or not, it's effective in doing what the movie set out to do. And I don't think the first two parts are, and they kind of drag on. And by the time it really starts cooking after the catacomb scene, they've already lost me for the most part. So, I mean, they did gain some goodwill back because, man, it gets silly. But, and then, like, again, that first scene, you could do as much as I like it as a scene into itself, you could do something else besides that. Save a lot of your FX budgets, because when the FX got the worst was Act 3.
Right. I did notice that.
Like when she comes up and knocks their boat into the air. I had to rewind that like 3 times, and I was just laughing out loud. I'm like, that is so bad, and it's in a good way. But I'm like, they looked pretty good in that first scene, and you could have taken some of that money and used it where it really counted. So. The last thing
I will say that the special effects for the shark seem to get a little progressively worse as the movie went on.
I mean, they only got $29 million to work with, right? Yeah, like, oh man, we shouldn't have shot that first scene first. So the last thing, and maybe this can kind of dovetail into Schlock, and either one of you can pick it up.
Well, I have a few more bad, but
okay. All right. Well, I'll ask this question, and then we'll go to you, and then we'll flip it around. However, the mayor.
Okay.
Jaws homage or lazy writing? Or both?
I liked the mayor because I hated her, and I'm
talking about the fact that it's the mayor, and of course they're against taking the people out of the water. It's the exact same trope from Jaws.
I would argue to say it's probably a little of both. I feel like it was I feel like it started off as like a kind of like a little bit of a nod to Jaws, but then I feel like they ran with it, like she became like this overbearing, like dictator type character, where like it's do as I say, and it's like okay.
I get that they were doing a fun nod to Jaws, and if it were smaller, I think I would have been okay with it. But I'm like, that's what every shark movie does.
Yeah. Well, I think it was trying to do a lot of nods to Jaws, because one of the only like little bits of trivia on IMDb is talking about the I forget what they're called, the bobber things, the buoys or whatever that are tracking along behind the shark. Right. They're trying to give a nod to Jaws on there. So I think it's in there on purpose.
Yeah, I just don't think it's effective. But what do you got for bad?
So kind of going with the IMDb stuff, I was noticing a lot of people are saying this is a movie where you're going to root for the shark because it's mostly people doing stupid people doing stupid things. And I couldn't help but notice right in the first scene when they see the shark swimming around, they're like, well, we got to get a sample. And he like stabs the shark. and it's like the shark was fine until they stabbed it, and then it starts eating everybody. And I wish they wouldn't have had that. Right. That the shark needs to attack unprovoked, right? For it to be like a true bad guy. But if you provoke it, then you have sympathy with the shark. But I think throughout the movie, there were just people doing dumb things. And that tends to get old really quick in movies. The other bad that I have is Netflix. So this is more of a general bad on Netflix in that. So if you look at our thumbnail for this video on YouTube, it's not a particularly interesting thumbnail. In fact, it's a screenshot from the movie. It's not a poster from the movie. And that's because going through and looking at the promotional material, and I think this bleeds over into the movie as well. I mean, the promotional material probably looks like this because the movie looks like this. It's just very gray and bland. And I think that's a symptom of Netflix movies, because everybody is trying to have this particular look, especially if you're making something specifically for Netflix. You're trying to have this kind of undersaturated, I don't know if it's an artsy look, but I just from the few original things that I see on Netflix lately, like they seem to have a very similar color palette. And so while that maybe works for this movie or not, that's up for debate. But I think that's something that's been overused in general for lower budget movies.
I mean, you can take the movies. I see that. I see that.
So there's that. I don't know. Take that or leave it. Put it in your back pocket. The last bad thing that I have is so I talked about the unexploded munitions. I definitely wanted to see them come back in, but I kind of thought that's how they would kill the shark, right? They would pop one into its mouth and explode it or something. But
you mean like Jaws?
Like Jaws.
How cool would it have been if they used the magnet fish to pull one out, whip it, lasso it around their head, and like fling it into the shark's mouth?
Now that's where it should have gone. They ain't do that in Jaws.
They didn't do that.
But so what happened is that one explodes and it creates this chain reaction, which again, like, I don't think that's exactly how that would go. Maybe because of the like concussion in the water. I don't know. I'm not a waterologist, but it creates this chain reaction that explodes the Seine. And now tell me, did I miss something? Is there a dam around Paris?
Right.
Now, what I read when I went back and read the synopsis, it says it creates a tsunami in the canal that floods Paris. Now, again, I'm no waterologist, but I'm pretty sure water always flows to the lowest point. Now, if there's a big canal there, I don't think exploding all of the water out of it would cover all of the buildings, would flood the tops of the buildings. Am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy.
Okay.
It's definitely a point of contention with myself and some of the reviews that I've read. And I usually, I'm usually a little bit more reserved when it comes to the ridiculous, but even then I'm like, there's not that much water in Paris. Like, everything that was already underwater is underwater. Like, there's no more water to put in Paris.
Right. So
it's like they had a really cool image and they worked backwards. Logic thrown out the window.
Yeah. Well, and that's going to take me, that's where I want to go into the schlock. But first, we got a comment here from Kristen Georgiev. I don't know. Man, I totally always appreciate when people come into the chat and interact with us. Is the movie good? Pretty good. Yeah. I like what you said, Lance. It's halfway decent.
It's halfway decent. It's definitely got some good aspects, but it's definitely got some.
It's perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's a perfectly cromulent movie. I wouldn't watch it again on my own, but if I had a group of friends together and we wanted a fun schlocky movie and they
absolutely.
picked it, I would totally watch it.
This is definitely a movie to sit down and watch with some friends, drink some beer, and just have a good time with it.
Yeah. So, Kristen, I hope that answers your question, and thank you for chiming in. I appreciate it. Let's move on to the schlock about this movie. I don't want to take this over by going on with my whole thing about the shells and whatnot. Chris, let's go with you. You want to keep going with the shells?
Because that's my biggest thing. It is so silly. The fact, are there some unexploded artillery shells in the Seine? I don't know. Maybe, probably from World War II when they dropped stuff on them. I don't. But how are they all just exactly under all the bridges perfectly? That's where they are, right? And there's just enough of explosion that it like catapults one through the water and it lands on another, and that causes them to. And the whole thing is in slow motion and tipping up, and then the sharks are like, it's almost
cartoonish
the way it's played out. And I loved it. Is it good? No, it is awful. It is awful. And it makes no sense that Paris gets flooded. But then they have the scenes that I love where you see shark fins among old architecture, just like in Shark in Venice, right?
Right.
Like there's something cool about that iconic image. I like that they're trapped at the end. I like that their plan doesn't work. And then they're just like, oh man, Paris is flooded and there's sharks all around. Like, no one thought this was going to happen. So
when it ended, I was a little like, oh, this is the end. I guess it's got to be. They're really screwed now.
Mm-hmm.
What scares me is they've left it open for a second one. So it's like,
right?
Where do you go? Like under Belgium or possibly under Venice?
Well, they went to New York. I think they went to Venice. In the closing credits, I think they showed the sharks spreading throughout the world, and I think they showed
from
Venice.
Shark World. Yeah.
Oh man, that sounds awesome.
Right, it's like Waterworld meets Escape from New York, but yeah.
So here's kind of where I was going with all of that. To me, this felt like it should have been a Deep Blue Sea sequel. Like that would make the most sense for me, right? If one of the genetically modified sharks had gotten out And this team of researchers like stumbles upon it because why wouldn't they? It's a smart shark. It's looking for people, right? Because it has a vendetta against them. And then the sharks are smart enough to create this mayhem, to start turning Earth into Shark World. See, like the weird problem with the end credits when it shows all the other cities getting taken over, there's kind of an implication that they've created super unrealistic tsunamis in other cities. Like it's all played out the same way throughout the world. Like it played out the same in Tokyo, played out the same in like Chicago, right? Like it's like just all over the world.
If Lilith can have thousands of shark babies and they're all swimming at the same time with the same velocity, it could, in theory, create tsunami waves of sharks that would crash into these seaside towns and cities and do that.
They're creating.
I'm not a waterologist, but I think that tracks.
I don't know. That's a perfect line for a cheeseball shark movie. I'm telling you right there.
Yeah,
you just wrote a whole character.
Yeah. I don't know if we're going to award best line of the night, but it goes to you, Darby. I'm not a waterologist.
right, exactly.
Man, don't encourage it. So big question I have, if we want to keep going with this Shark World thing,
sure,
I'm all ears. But big question I have is, wouldn't it have been cool if our protagonist was Death? Like, had that encounter with the shark, right? Because I'm thinking like
it caused one of her ears to have damage. So yeah, that would have been cool.
Like Chris, you talked about how she didn't. One of the things you didn't like was that she didn't really pursue the shark in any way afterward. 3 years later, she avoided it, which I think you can make an argument for why she did, which maybe should have come out in story a little bit more. But I mean, it also makes me think of like you could have had a really cool Ahab character, right? Totally. Someone who's obsessed with the great white shark, and instead of
Paris, and no one believes her.
Instead of her missing a leg, right? She's lost her hearing to the shark. Like I think that's an interesting character, and I'm kind of disappointed they didn't go in that direction. And how many deaf protagonists do you get?
Right. There's a few. Yeah, no, I think that's a cool idea. The triathlon was super schlocky. The homage to Jaws. I love a bunch of swimmers just getting taken out. And they're great scene. What if that would have came like more toward the midpoint?
Yeah,
it felt like, like all the all the great beats.
The middle really sort of fell out of the movie. And they really needed something to up the tension a little bit more, which I think maybe they were doing. They wanted that to be their finale, and I think maybe they upped the tension with the environmentalist slaughter. But yeah, everything before that, they just needed some more. Right. The dog. Remember the little dog? I was like, man, that dog is going to get eaten. That dog's going, man.
She's like, get away from the water. And the guy's like, shut up, bitch.
What's up with the little dog surviving in shark movies? Didn't that happen in the Meg as well? Like it shows the dog paddling at the end. I can't eat dogs anymore.
Hope. Plus, sharks don't like hot dogs. It's a fact. I'm not a waterologist, but it's a fact.
Yeah. So I agree. It should have been moved.
It was just
the second act was a lot of bureaucracy revolving around the triathlon itself, which that didn't need to be such a heavy part of the movie. Like she established that she wasn't going to change anything. It was pretty well established that the triathlon's going to happen no matter what, and it's basically going to be a foreshadowing for the massacre that you're going to see.
Right, you know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
It's just it's back to back instead of being able to react off of that. Like, oh, they killed all the triathlons and they will get out to the ocean. We have to keep them in the same.
Well, it was almost like everything from the catacombs to the end of the movie that was your bread and butter, and it was just an all third act like. Full on, massacre of sharks versus people.
That's everything you're going to put in your trailer, right?
Right,
that's
exactly.
Stuff. They're not going to put the water police in the trailer.
the river brigade.
I mean,
Yeah.
and that's where bad structure comes in. I'm like, yeah, you want to have the biggest, best stuff at the end, but you got to have moments throughout the film to keep you invested in going forward and like, oh, this was cool. How much cooler is it going to get next? Oh, right in the middle of triathlon. Oh, how much cooler is it going to get next? Oh, they use these artillery shells to blow up all the bridges.
They blew up Paris.
Yeah. to be fair, I think that they were trying to create like some compelling characters that we care about. Right, the police. I
was a little disappointed when the dude died at the end. Like, and he's like, "Did we get him?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah,
no,
they're all dead." Like deep down, you're like, we're screwed.
Well, the guy who like he was in the army, but he abandoned his brothers in arms because he was scared. Right, they're trying to like build up this story arc, and it just kind of.
So again, it's a shark movie. It's unnecessary.
Not to get too somber, but I think the saddest death, which is interesting because you don't really learn to care about a ton of these characters. I mean, the main two you kind of do because you're with them so long. Mm-hmm. But in the catacombs, the main environmentalist, her girlfriend?
Ben, I believe.
Yeah. No, is that her name?
Yeah.
I think that's the girlfriend's name.
Okay, yeah. The girlfriend. It's her death is sad because the shark doesn't kill her.
Yeah, she gets trampled essentially.
Yeah, she gets trampled. It's the selfish human nature of all the other characters, and that's the one that like sticks with her. Like, oh,
yeah.
What also sucks about that is like that was also after the fact that like she tried to redeem herself. Mm-hmm. By turning the tracker back on and trying to do the right thing and like, hey, my girlfriend's completely nuts.
Do the right thing.
You know, and she got eaten by the shark, which was completely justified.
She went
messing with sharks.
But this poor girl got trampled to death because people are assholes.
Yeah,
right. It's just
it potentially is the most interesting character arc in some way, and the most tragic death. But it really is kind of just washed over.
Well, and what sucks is like she's the voice of reason. She's like, I am an environmentalist. We do need to do better, but this isn't the way to do it. You know, she establishes like this isn't how we should go about doing this.
Right.
Yeah. Like, should we kill as many sharks as we do? Obviously not. Yeah, that's bad that we have so much shark fin soup. No one's going to argue with that.
Well, and you can thank Jaws. Remember, Jaws greatly increased the amount of sharks being hunted.
Yeah, we had this conversation last year of like the
environmental impact that a movie has.
Environmental impact and civic duty of a film. But like
it's true. I remember that.
Lance is completely right. She was the voice of reason of like, we can have it. We can have a bit of both. We can find a middle ground. We do need to do something. This isn't the way to do it. We need to conversation. And her death was the most tragic because it was us killing her.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't the shark. And it's so interesting in horror movies. I'm like, does that happen in other horror movies? I'm sure it happens all the time, but I'm like trying to think of it. I'm like, where the whole point is to go there and watch a shark kill people. That's why we're going to this movie. That's why we got Netflix to watch it, right? That's a shark movie. Sharks kill, and you want inventive kills and craziness, and you kind of want the shark to die too at the end. But that's the point of this. And like,
well, it's a pretty common trope though that man is the real monster. You know,
right? Yeah.
Well, so, I think to Chris's point though, like her death is almost a byproduct of the storyline, you know, where, you know, because man is the real monster, but her death in a sense is a byproduct of all of that. When, like he said, like really you're there for the shark versus man aspect as opposed to, and I think the other thing that sucks too is like, you know, regardless of her being an environmentalist or not, or whatever your outlook is on that, she was relatively innocent in all of that, you know. Her death was an innocent death, which I think is another thing that kind of sucks about the whole thing. Not only was she trampled by a man, like she didn't really deserve it in any aspect either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just interesting. I guess my whole takeaway is that the most interesting death in the movie
was not of the shark.
Was not of the shark. And so I'm like, is the most interesting death in a vampire movie not of Dracula? Where does that happen?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, now that's a good point. Yeah, for sure.
right.
Have to
And I'm
keep
like,
an eye out for that.
that's the heart of the movie. And I would have loved to see more of that character. She was so much more compelling than the lead. And the lead's a great actress, and I thought she did a great job, but like
The character sucked.
Yeah, I mean, she tried. She tried at the end, but it felt weird because of that 3-year gap, and that might just be me.
Yeah. Well, I got a question kind of moving on. The water police, the river brigade. So that seemed really weird to me. However, I live and have lived my entire life in landlocked states. So Lance, maybe you can answer this. Do these types of police exist?
As our resident waterologist.
Yeah. Do you live where there's like canals and stuff?
I live in Central Florida, where we are completely surrounded by lakes. And obviously,
the lake police.
We don't have any lake police per se. We do have Florida Wildlife something, the FWC or Florida Wildlife Control or some jazz like that, that specialize in, capturing and moving like alligators, crocodiles, pythons, stuff like that. Yeah. But in my area, they're not like actively running up and down the river
looking for scuba divers.
Right.
Like you can't scuba dive.
But I mean, one could argue, like, in California, Baywatch was a thing,
Okay. Yeah. Well, it just seemed odd to me because there's the River Brigade, and it just felt like these are the only police in Paris. Like there's no other law enforcement around.
Right.
And they are very, very particular about the river here, the canal here. Like you can't dive in it.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was, I don't know much about France, and I probably should since it's part of my lineage. But you could argue like, I guess like the Ozarks, where in the summertime, it's primarily like just people on water all the time. Like they do have actual patrol up and down the rivers, like they would like a state highway. But that's really only during like the season. Come wintertime, there's not as many people in the water. The locals are the only ones there. So they, they're not doing it 24 hours a day.
I guess it would make sense in the movie if, they're having this big triathlon coming up and the Paris Olympics coming up, they would have a greater presence there
that makes sense.
that time. But it's just so odd that when things went haywire, they didn't like call in more police. They called in the army. Like there's no more water police. Like, it's like
only these 6 5 people. Guys.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I mean, there have been other movies about like river police. Though I'm thinking of like Bruce Willis in the '90s and Striking Distance, right?
Great movie.
Great movie. I think that's Pittsburgh, maybe. I can't remember, but he's a river cop. I mean, there are other cops, but since the movie kind of focuses on them, you don't see a lot of them. So I don't know if that's a bad storytelling or just the nature of like focusing on a certain group of like. They also have firefighters, but we didn't see them either. You know what I'm saying? Right. That doesn't mean that they're
Shark
not
didn't
there.
start anything on fire.
Yeah, everything got
water fighters.
Water fighters.
Get rid of all this water.
They needed more waterologists.
They did.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're just getting into Sillyville here, but other things that I thought were cool under Schlocky, you talked about the catacombs. That was so cool looking, especially when they were trying to blow it up and it was all murky and all the thousands of sharks swimming and they're like trying to get through with the bombs, and like that was a fun little sequence. I mean,
the whole catacomb scene visually it looked cool. It really did.
It did.
But like at the same time, I'm like, okay, you get this, like you're in the catacombs. This dumb broad's in the water, like holding a baby shark for some reason, because that's a thing that people do. Like Darby said earlier, there's just a lot of people doing a lot of stupid things in this movie. But like what killed me was like when they're doing like they pan this one shot and you're like, it's like 30 people in here, and then when the shark attack happens, it's like, apparently there's 130 people in here because there was so many more people trying to escape than you actually ever saw prior to that.
It just went on for so long.
And then the other thing was, like, you brought it up earlier, like, how deep are these catacombs? Because one, you've got this giant shark living in here, and now it's given birth to like 150 freaking sharks,
which are also growing exponentially.
Right, of course. And don't get me wrong, it was a cool shot. Chris is right. It was a cool shot when they pan up and you see all these sharks and the lights hitting them. You're like, holy crap. It's almost like Pitch Black, like with Vin Diesel. You see all the things like flying in the air. You're like, holy crap, there's a lot of these things. It's a cool shot. But like, it's just, for me, it was like, it took me out of it a little bit because it's like, it's not feasible. I feel like this movie would have worked better for me if it was just the one shark in the catacombs.
Yeah, one shark, or if it would have set up its Saturday morning cartoon vibes from the get-go.
Right.
Right? Because if we were watching like some like late 90s like action kids show and they're like, you know, National Treasure type people and they find this like catacomb with these sharks, we would have bought into it.
Like Ninja Turtles, where the sewers are just infinite. Like it's like Journey to the Center of the Earth, right? There's just a whole other entire world.
Whole other world. It's not, you know, it's very spacious. You can walk around.
Well, and Lance, you brought up something at the very beginning of the show, maybe not the very beginning, but when we started talking about the movie, of how it was trying to be a bunch of different movies, right? And that's where tone comes in. And we're saying we love these crazy things at the end in and of themselves, but they don't work because they took us out of it because that tone was not established.
Exactly. You know, when you go from like the opening scene, you know, you have like your shark attacks, and like I said, that establishes a lot of stuff. And then from there, you kind of get like a couple of horror tones, like legitimate like horror tones, like Michael Myers type stuff. Like during the second act, like you see a fin in the water, but nobody notices it. You know, like that's the killer doing the stalking. And then, you know, you get to the catacombs, and then like you said, with that cool shot of all the sharks, and now it's like like sci-fi. Like you've dived into this alien, you know, egg pit that, you know, they're all going to hatch, or, you know, you've got this Pitch Black type scenario with all of them flying around, and it wanted to be a lot of different things, and it couldn't land on one to go with. And had it landed on one of those things, or like Chris said, if it was going to establish itself as a cartoon like Sharknado from the get-go, okay, fine, I'm along for the ride. Just let me know what the hell I'm getting into.
Yeah. And I mean, and the other things in and of themselves are pretty effective. Like when the girl dives down to the car and there's the big shark teeth imprint in the door. That's kind of creepy, and it's all murky, and it's kind of like, that's pretty effective as a little horror scene in and of itself. But like, it doesn't go anywhere. It's just,
Yeah, that was a great scene. I was watching it. I was like, get out of the water.
Right. And then you're glad the cops are
Yeah, exactly. So, well, that's all that I have for Schlock. Does anybody have any final thoughts on this movie or any more Schlock?
So I do have one little tidbit of information that I found interesting, and I couldn't find a whole lot of detail on this. I stumbled upon it in one of the reviews that I was reading, but apparently this movie ran into some legal issues before it ever got distributed out through Netflix, because there was this, and I don't know if this is any better or worse, but this there was a different writer who sued on like grounds of like plagiarism or something like that, because he wrote a story that was very similar about a man eating catfish in the Seine River. So
that's so much cooler.
and that's what I'm thinking. Like, okay, so man eating catfish, and it's very similar. And I'm like, would it have been a better movie if it was one man eating catfish in the Seine River versus a shark? Because I'm thinking like Austin Powers. Like, I wanted sharks, but I got ill-tempered sea bass. You know. So, like, would it have been a better movie if it was this big man-eating catfish? I mean, it would have made more sense since it's a freshwater fish, and they do get really freaking big.
Oh, that is true.
But could you make a catfish?
It would have been a comedy for
horror movie, right?
Because no one's scared of catfish.
Well, yeah. Here's how you make it: everyone thinks it's a shark, and at the end, it turns out to be a catfish.
and they were like catfished.
They were catfished.
They were catfish.
Double entendre.
A catfish.
That's brilliant. Okay,
Yeah.
we
I
need to
think
write
this
a
man
script.
needs to run with his original idea.
I say make the movie. I'm down. I will watch it.
But on a note on that, what is interesting to me is that we get what Darby said, like 100 shark movies a year, right?
Right.
That's probably we're getting as many shark movies as Lilith was pumping out shark movies per year.
Parthenogenesis is producing more.
And there are so many other really cool, wicked, scary sea creatures. And I would like to see
True.
another giant squid movie, or one of those
Yeah.
like creepy angler fish with the little light bulb. I mean, there's
A big one.
maybe
of
some
those.
dinosaurs.
More
Some
Deep
dinosaur-
Rising
yeah.
movies. Get a
Yeah, I
sequel
mean,
to that.
there's so much untapped. Why not a killer dolphin?
Yeah.
You think they're smart? They get so smart, right? The ocean is an untapped opportunity that I think, while I always want a shark movie, and especially I want a shark movie in July, I could go for some other sea creatures. That's all I'm saying. Maybe not a catfish, but
Or even like
something.
big crabs.
Giant
you know?
urchin.
Giant crabs. Yeah. Urchin. Yep.
Yeah. It's terrifying. All right. Yeah. Final thoughts on the movie. We could go for maybe some different sea creatures. I really wish this was a Deep Blue Sea sequel. I believe there are sequels to that movie.
There
You're
is
gonna
a
have to
Deep
check
Blue
out.
Sea 2 and a 3, I believe. And if I remember correctly, 3's halfway decent. 2 was pretty awful, even by shark movie standards.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't all be Shark in Venice.
Yeah, they can't.
They cannot.
It's
I mean,
true.
Shark and Venice is still my favorite of the movies we've seen.
All right. Well,
Yeah, that's it.
that's all I have on Under Paris. So I think we're gonna get sung out here. But normally we would tell you, but
Nobody heard any of that.
You cut out.
we're still working. We're still working on our mini feature Teddy Bear. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for more shorter video essay style content. Definitely check out Lance the Obscure Movie Guy's channel. He's always pumping out stuff, and it's always really interesting. I'm Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson. This is Chris Anonymous. This is Lance the Obscure Movie Guy. This has been Shark Month 2024 in the bag, and we will see you on the flippity flop. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Peace out.